Running has always been my way to clear my head. Almost every evening, right after a light dinner, I'd lace up my shoes and head out just before sunset. The route never changed. Quiet sidewalks for a short distance, then a narrow entrance into a wooded trail most people didn't even know existed. The forest had two paths. One was paved and safe. The other was dirt and winding, surrounded by thick trees. I usually chose the dirt path on the way in. It felt calmer, more private. In fact, that was the appeal. I rarely saw anyone else out there. That evening felt no different. The air was warm, the light fading fast, and the woods were unusually silent. About a mile into the trail, my phone made a sound that instantly put me on edge. It wasn't a text, it wasn't a call, it was an airdrop alert. My first thought was confusion. My second was panic. Someone had to be nearby, close enough for their phone to find mine. I slowed down, pretending to adjust my music, and glanced at the screen. What I saw made my stomach drop. It was a photo. The picture showed me running. Same clothes, same trail, same moment. The caption was short: "Turn around." The angle told me everything. Whoever took it had been hidden off the path, watching, close, very close. I didn't hesitate. I locked my phone and started running faster than I ever had before. The paved trail felt miles away. Behind me, branches snapped, leaves shifted, footsteps followed, but I never looked back. I knew slowing down could be the difference between escaping and not. As the forest finally opened into backyards, I cut through fences and lawns, changing direction again and again until the sound stopped. The last thing I heard was metal clinking, like something hard being adjusted or lifted. I made it home shaking, breathless, and terrified. I never went back to that forest. I disabled AirDrop permanently, and to this day, I still don't know who took that photo or what would have happened if I had turned around. Some routines are meant to be broken, because sometimes you're not as alone as you think.
My brother-in-law and I were driving across the country late at night. We were somewhere in the middle of New Mexico, on a highway so empty it felt unreal. Rest stops were rare, sometimes over 100 miles apart, and by midnight we were both exhausted. When we finally saw the sign for the next rest stop, we agreed to pull over and get a few hours of sleep. The rest stop was lit up, but the parking lot was almost completely empty. Only one car was parked near the building. It looked old and beat up, and I couldn't see a license plate. We got out and walked toward the entrance. Each of us grabbed a door handle. Locked. That alone was strange. The lights inside were clearly on, and there was no sign saying it was closed. I stepped closer to the glass and shielded my eyes so I could see inside. That's when I froze. On the back wall, there was a large streak of bright red. It wasn't faded, it wasn't dry, it was blood. I pointed it out to my brother-in-law, and I watched the color drain from his face as he realized what we were looking at. We turned around immediately and headed back to our vehicle. As I opened the door, I took another look at the car parked nearby. In the back window was an empty gun rack. At that exact moment, the door to the rest stop slowly began to open. We didn't wait to see who or what was inside. We drove for hours before we finally had enough signal to call the police. Days later, I followed up, hoping for some explanation. I never got one. To this day, I don't know what happened in that rest stop. But I know one thing for sure. If we had stayed even a minute longer, this story might never have been told.
I was home alone that night with only my dog for company. It was close to midnight, and before going to bed, I let him outside one last time. This was our normal routine. He would wander around the yard for a few minutes, then scratch at the door when he was ready to come back in. I locked the door behind him and went upstairs to get ready for bed. A few minutes later, as I was coming back downstairs, I heard scratching at the front door. Soft, slow, familiar. Without thinking much of it, I walked toward the door. But I've always had one habit. I never open the door without looking first, no matter who I expect to see. I leaned in and looked through the peephole. My heart stopped. It wasn't my dog. It was a man standing inches from the door, his head lowered, staring directly at the handle. He wasn't moving. He wasn't knocking. Then the scratching started again, louder this time. I realized the sound wasn't coming from an animal. It was his hand. I stood frozen, barely breathing. I reached for my phone, trying to take a picture through the peephole, but the image came out blurry. Suddenly, the man lifted his shirt and pulled out a knife. He began trying to work the lock. Seconds felt like hours. Then, from the darkness outside, my dog started barking, deep, aggressive, and loud. That was enough. The man stepped back, glanced around, and ran off into the night. Moments later, my dog appeared at the door, scratching the way he always did. I let him in and locked every door and window in the house. I later filed a police report, but nothing ever came of it. I moved not long after, and to this day I still wonder how many people open their doors without looking first. At the time, I was living out of my car. A few bad financial decisions had left me with no other option. After finishing a long, late shift at work, I was completely exhausted. I pulled into a large store parking lot I'd slept in before. It felt safe enough. I climbed into the back seat, started the engine to keep warm, and fell asleep almost instantly. I forgot to lock the doors. I woke up slowly, confused by a low humming sound. For a moment, I thought I was still dreaming. Then I looked out the side window. Trees were moving past me. The car was driving. Someone was in the driver's seat. They wore a hood pulled low, hiding their face. I couldn't see their eyes, but I could tell they knew exactly where they were going. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it. I reached quietly into the side compartment where I kept a small knife. Without thinking, I sat up and pointed the knife forward, screaming at the driver to stop. They saw the reflection in the mirror. The car slammed to a halt. The driver jumped out without a word and ran straight into the trees lining the road, disappearing into the darkness. I sat there shaking, alone on an unfamiliar road, surrounded by dense forest. My phone said it was nearly 3 a.m. and I had no signal. When I finally reached help, I realized I was more than 2 hours away from where I had fallen asleep. I still don't know who that person was or how they didn't notice me in the back. Sometimes I tell myself they only wanted the car, but sometimes I wonder if they wanted me. In my early 20s, I used dating apps frequently. Most conversations went nowhere, but one night I matched with someone who lived unusually close, only a couple of miles away.
That alone felt strange, because by then the app usually suggested people much farther out. Her profile looked normal at first. We talked briefly and agreed to meet for dinner that same evening. I offered to pick her up, and she sent me an address at an apartment complex. When I arrived, I texted her, asking which building she was in. As I waited, I opened her profile again. That's when I noticed it. The photos didn't look like the same person. Each picture showed a woman who looked similar but not identical. Different facial features, different smiles. I felt uneasy, but tried to convince myself I was overthinking it. She texted back, telling me to come to the door instead of waiting in the car. The apartment building was quiet, too quiet. As I walked up, I noticed the door was slightly open. I raised my hand to knock. Before I touched it, I heard a voice from inside, low and urgent. "Be quiet, he's right outside." It was a man's voice. Every instinct in my body told me to leave. I turned around and ran back to my car, heart pounding the entire way. When I got home, my phone showed new messages from the same account. "I saw you. Why did you leave? Come back." I ignored them. Then another message arrived. "We got your license plate." I deleted the app immediately and didn't sleep that night. I kept checking my windows, listening for sounds outside. Nothing happened, but even now, years later, I still think about that door, slightly open, and the man whispering from the other side. I don't know who was behind that profile. I don't know how many people were involved. All I know is this. That night, I wasn't meeting someone for a date. I was being lured, and whoever was inside that apartment already knew I was there.